This week, we're re-releasing one of our favorites, a conversation with Bobby Stuckey, Master Sommelier and co-founder of Frasca Hospitality Group, in celebration of Bobby and his team winning Outstanding Restaurant at the James Beard Award, one of the highest honors in the culinary world. If you know Bobby, this comes as no surprise. He spent decades redefining hospitality, building world-class restaurants, and leading with humility, passion, and precision. Frasca has become a cornerstone of Colorado's culinary scene, and now the entire country is taking note. In this episode, Dan sits down with Bobby to talk about his journey from the French Laundry and the Little Nell to building one of the most respected restaurant groups in the country. They get into wine, leadership, service, and what it really takes to create unforgettable experiences. Let's poke the bear to kick off the conversation.
Bobby Stuckey, Colorado royalty. I'm here with Colorado royalty this time. I've had tech entrepreneurs, I've had people, professors from the university, some nonprofit leaders, some politicians, but never have I had Colorado royalty like I have right now with Bobby Stuckey. He's one of our most cherished leaders, individuals throughout the Colorado community. And I am so appreciative of the fact that I'm able to share your story with maybe people who know very little about you, and maybe even get you some business in the process.
I like that. Well, Dan, thank you. And I'm humbled and honored to be on here. And just when you reached out, I thought, oh yeah, I'd love to, because such a big fan and friend of you guys. So thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. And where I want to start is something that I know you're going to express a lot of pride over. And that is that a lot of people who worked with you, that you mentored, went off and did their own endeavors. Sometimes very successfully, I'm sure sometimes, with less success. But how proud does that make you feel?
It's so fantastic. And just because someone works for you, you're not guaranteed the DNA from where you worked. But I have been very lucky to have literally, I have 250 employees. There's a lot of turnover in industry. So in 20 years, literally thousands of employees have come and gone. And I'm so proud I've enjoyed working with all of them. Sure, there was rough points with some employees, whatever, but
sure,
some of these employees that have left and have changed the landscape of whatever they're doing around the world really is really fulfilling. And it's amazing how many, I feel so humbled and honored. So many of them reach out. Like I was just talking to Grant Reynolds, who's in New York. He has the Parcel Wine. He has the Parcel Wine Bars. He's opening a new Japanese restaurant like this week. There's just so many. I mean, right here in town, Brian Dayton. Mm-hmm. Brian Dayton, I remember the day we found his lease where Oak is.
Really?
Oh, yeah. He'd come to me previously. He had not put his notice in, but he said, hey, Bobby, I want to have my own restaurant. I think Pierce was born, but maybe, or just about to be born, but he wanted to do his own thing. And Brian's an amazing restaurateur, and he had told me that he wanted to find a place. And my old landlord I had a meeting with him. Lachlan and I had a meeting with him, and we were sitting outside the meeting. And I was not being nosy, but I overheard him talking to an attorney about how it was going to be the end of his tenant there. And I said, hey, before we start this meeting, Brian Dayton, my bar manager, he's looking for a space. You should talk to him. And like something like that.
It worked out.
Yeah. It worked out great.
Fantastic. So that's something to be so proud of. And that has also helped the Colorado community as well, because with those spawn-offs have meant, a much more vibrant scene here. But your first engagement in Colorado wasn't in Boulder.
No.
It was in Aspen.
Yeah.
So you want to walk us through that and how that came about? And
so it was about, embarrassed to say this, almost 30 years ago. It was 29 years ago. I was young, working hard as a sommelier. I was working for a couple.
You're still young, Bobby.
I was working for a couple named Tom Kaufman and Carissa, and I wanted a full-time sommelier job. And at that time, there weren't many. I had interviewed for a position at the Phoenician in Scottsdale, where I grew up. And then I got an opportunity to interview for the position at the Little Nell as the assistant. And my mentor, my boss, Tom Kaufman's like, you've got to do the Little Nell. I just know it'll be the right thing for you. And I was like in my mid-20s, and I thought the Phoenician seemed more of a safe deal because I was from Scottsdale. He's like, Bobby, no, you got to do this. And man, he was so right because.
And why was he right?
He was right on every front. The Crown family who owned the Little Nell were a Chicago family.
Yes.
Amazing to work for.
Yes.
The team I was going in to work under, the general manager, Eric Calderon, my immediate boss, food and beverage director, Connie Thornburg, and that whole team was such a big reach for me. They were so more metist than I was. I learned every hour, not every day, every hour I was learning something from these great food and beverage leaders that I was getting to work with. And it was just the right moment. There were so many things that added up, and it was just fantastic.
Slight tangent here. So the Crown family, and it was Jim Crown, right?
Well, at that time, Lester was still running the show, but Jim was in line to become the great Jim Crown. We already knew he was the great Jim Crown.
Yeah. So I had an opportunity to meet him about 4 years ago in Aspen. He was part of an investor conference, but really a conference for some of their clients that were dealing with kind of, broader family, planning type matters. And the conference was held in Aspen, and Jim and his wife hosted it. Part of
Jim
it,
and Paula,
at their really beautiful ranch property. And then afterwards, as kind of the afternoon excursion, we went on that track where you race. Yeah. And then it was just a year or two after that Jim on that very track had a tragic accident.
On his birthday.
On his birthday. It was his 70th birthday, if I'm right. And he's such a nice individual, such a legendary family, still are a legendary family, but to see Jim's life very healthy.
Yes.
Not just for his age, but healthy in general, to see his life come to a tragic end, that's something that, has stayed with me.
Yeah. I mean, his father and mother, Lester and Renee, were really still very much part of the business 30 years ago. But Jim had stepped into overseeing everything. And he was a unique individual. I don't think enough of society knew how unique he is. Great philanthropist,
for certain.
Great financial leader, great leader of that company, but also an incredible human being.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just don't get many of those.
Right. Humble, warm.
Yeah.
That's how I came across, at least in that, handfuls of hours I was able to spend, at least in the group with him. I had some one-on-one time, but not a lot. But it was just, you could tell this was a, top shelf individual.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So tragic. So let's also go on another excursion if we can. And I'll preface this by saying this might be one of the most interesting parts of this podcast, I suspect, because I've heard you take me through it before. Talk us through what it means to be a master sommelier and the process in which you achieve that. And also, I think, one of your contributions here in Colorado is having a high density of master sommeliers. How did that happen?
Well, going back to the Little Nell, before I went to the Little Nell, before I get to that, I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent to say how we got to this point. I would like to say, how do I go from bussing tables in Phoenix, Arizona to how did I even get to bussing tables and then going to the Master Sommelier diploma?
Yeah, that's a little bit of
it's a long one.
A couple steps in between those two.
Yeah. So I think it flows really well. Look, I'm dyslexic and ADD, and I'm of the age group, I'm in my mid 50s, that they didn't diagnose me until my freshman year in college. So I was this kid, I didn't want to be an average or below average student, but I was trying so hard and I was running a lot of issues. And then I found bussing tables and it was like a light went off. I was like, wow, this is really great positive reinforcement outside of my family. Like, your mom and dad love you, so you're always getting that. But like that. And I just realized, oh my, this is an industry for me. But this is in the mid 80s. There wasn't a real path. There was some hotel schools, but there wasn't I couldn't go to my granddad or my mom and dad and say, hey, this is what I want to do. There wasn't it was a very blue collar industry. And I was in college in Flagstaff, waiting tables. And then I saw a brochure on my boss's desk. This is before the internet. You couldn't look anything,
Sounds like you've snooped around a little bit in your younger days.
Yeah.
Let's see, the Dayton story, the boss's desk. Okay.
But I was
Make sure you cover up those important documents over there.
It was just a brochure about doing the quartermaster sommeliers. And I went to him and I said, hey, what do you think about this? He goes, oh, I kept that piece of mail. I thought it'd be great for you.
Also,
you're interested in wine. He's like, you should do this. I don't want to do it. He didn't want to do it, but you should do this. And so,
it's a ton of work.
Yeah, and it was. And there wasn't really a path of how to get from A to B. It was, you have your intro level. Now they call it intro to certified, but you had your intro. You take that. It was a couple-day class. It's like getting your ankles wet. And then you're kind of on your own to go to the advanced. The advanced is, back then, they do it differently now, but back then you would have a set of classes and then you do service, theory, and tasting in 3 days. You have to pass all three at a certain percentage. And then the master's, if you choose to continue, the master's is you have to have your theory score. So this happens once a year. So you sit down in front of some master sommeliers and they fire off, say 100 questions or whatever. And you sit there and you can't take notes or anything or write anything down. You have to answer orally the question or pass. Say, I don't know it. So that's theory. And then service was really like just theory on your feet. They would mock up a room like this and they would drill. It's just like getting drilled on these theory questions, but you're standing up decanting wine or doing whatever. And then you have the blind tasting is 6 wines in a prescribed amount of time, like 25 minutes. And you have to get a certain score. Now, the thing about the masters is, let's say you have a good day on theory and pass that day, you now have 2 years to pass the other 2. So, in my case, I passed service and theory, failed tasting, and then it became bigger than life. It really was this enormous gorilla that I was carrying around on my back all the time. And the pressure and the anxiety because you only had one.
Yeah, the time's ticking.
Oh, time's ticking. And then I didn't, and I had to reset. And my boss at the time and my wife, my other boss, my 2 bosses, Danette and Thomas Keller's like, I was like, I had to reset. It's called the reset. And Thomas and Danette, both separately, but I don't know if they talked this out before, but they both said, hey, keep going. Don't worry about it. There's no timeline. This isn't for your job. This isn't for the prestige or whatever. It's just your journey. So I flew to London, passed service and theory again, back in the game, came back, passed tasting. But
and tasting, let's go through that a little bit, because tasting, it's like, okay, 6 wines. How hard could that be to know which wine is which if you drink wines? But what do you have to know about each of those wines in order to pass the blind taste test?
Well, let's say you've got the world of wine. You don't know where anything could be coming from.
So it could come from anywhere.
Anywhere. So like a great example would be you've got 3 whites, 3 reds. I kind of like went pretty off-piste when I went into the exam that I passed, and I tasted reds first. And I remember everyone was like, what is this guy doing? And I did it because during practice, I was realizing that I was getting warmed up quicker on reds, like my palate, like I was zoning in quicker. So I'm like, to give myself some momentum, I was going to taste reds first. So you go through the reds, and you kind of, what you do is you smell through them, and then you kind of, as soon as you touch it, your clock's ticking. So you look at them, touch, boom, clock's ticking, and you've got to manage your time. And you're allowed to have a watch up there, or you're allowed to they can let you know 5 minutes to go, 2 minutes to go, or halftime or whatever. And you're going through it, and you've got to look at the wine. Like, wines tell you clues. So if you're looking at a pale red wine and it has a little maybe brickish hue, and then you go to smell it, and you smell anise, dried potpourri of flowers, these things. And then you're thinking, okay, these can be, Pinot Noir can be that way, Nebbiolo can be that way, Sangiovese can be that way, Tempranillo can be that way, but it's pretty pale. We know it's not Syrah. We know it's not Cabernet. We know it's not Mourvèdre. Then you taste it, and you go, oh, wow, the tannins are high, alcohol's high, acidity's high. Where am I going to take that? Maybe you're lucky enough that day to whittle it down and take it to Nebbiolo and call it to Barolo. And then hopefully you get the right vintage right. Like, especially something like Piedmont, there's a lot of differences of vintage. You don't want to call it 2003, which was a super hot vintage, when it was really 2002, which was a rain-soaked vintage.
So you have to figure out the vintage as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
so theory is it's just
huge.
another extension of theory. It's just using your mouth, right?
Yeah, but go through. I mean, you figure out what rough region of the world is it from? What region from within that world? You keep going deeper and deeper till you get to the point where, okay, I think I know what the wine is, but I got to know what vintage it is, what year it is as well. So you have to know all those things to get it right.
Yeah, and
I can't even imagine.
It's, and all, like, the really hard thing about that exam isn't the 6 wines. It's having those 3 people staring at you while you're doing the 6 wines. Like, that pressure was really hard. And when I finally got to the point, I said, I'm going to practice so hard. Like, I'm going to go in there and be relaxed and enjoy it. Then I finally.
And how do you practice for that? How do you practice so hard?
I would give a couple things. One advantage I had was I was the head sommelier at the French Laundry, and we had an all-world.
He kind of sneaks that in there. The head sommelier at the French Laundry, which is by many people's regard one of the best restaurants in the world,
and one of the best jobs. Man, it was so fun working for Thomas. It was great, but I would have to see a lot of suppliers to taste wine, and I would ask them, could I please be blind tasted? So instead of them coming in with their William Sellium Pinot and a Bon Clement Chardonnay, they would just pour me it blind. And I would just, so if I'm doing that every day, I'm like working on that muscle memory every day. And it really did help. And then my wife, Danette, we'd have a certain budget, and she would go to, in Napa, she would go see Dan at Backstreet Wines, and she would get like 3 whites, 3 reds. And then she was keeping track of like what I was struggling with.
Yeah. So talk a little bit more about Danette. I mean, you guys have had a great partnership. I mean, marriage, but a great partnership as well. So why don't we talk about her a little bit?
Yeah, I would love to. Southside Chicago, Joliet girl.
Yes, she is.
Yes.
Which is where I'm from. And even closer, My parents and my sisters moved just south of Joliet, so literally
right there.
10 minutes.
So Danette and I met a little over 25 years ago. She was living in Chicago at the time, and we were set up on a blind date. Jody Larner, who's the restaurateur at Cash in Aspen, and Max Martinez, the gentleman who owns the Max clothing stores.
Mm-hmm.
He used to not have a store in Aspen. At that time, he didn't. And he'd do trunk shows up there. And he would eat at the Little Nell after his trunk show because he would stay there. And then he and Jody would have dinner. And they're like, we've got to set you up with a friend of ours. I was like, oh, and she lives in Chicago. I was like, well, that doesn't help anything.
Didn't mention the Joliet part.
Yeah. So yeah, we've been together 25 years, and she is such an incredible best friend, partner, wife, but also motivator. She has been there. She got me through the Master Sommelier diploma. She got me to, it was, a big deal to leave the Nell to go to the French Laundry. That was a scary thing. She was like, we're doing it. Let's do it. French Laundry, let's do it. And then to leave the French Laundry to open a restaurant in Boulder 20 years ago, that was a really scary proposition. But she was there the whole time.
All right. So we're going to come back in a little bit and talk about sommeliers in Colorado, but let's talk about some of your favorite experiences at the French Laundry in Napa Valley.
Maybe the most incredible experience at the French Laundry was something that I hope I don't think I ever took for granted, and I hope no one who worked there during that era did, was the availability of my boss, Thomas Keller, and Laura Cunningham, meaning they were in the trenches with me every day. Like Chef Thomas and I had almost the same schedule. Like he would work lunch on Saturday, I would work dinner, but the other days of the week we had the same shifts. And that's a really exciting thing to have arguably one of the greatest chefs on this planet at that era nightly next to you and rooting for you. And I think what was great about Thomas is Thomas always it was before he had Per Se in New York. And if you ever listen to any podcasts about him, he's very open about this. Like when he was on the NPR piece, How I Built This, he talks about losing his restaurant Raquel in New York in 1987 and losing his job at Checkers Hotel in Los Angeles and then going to Napa. And I think he never said this, but I feel that he had this is before Per Se opened. He definitely had this competitive edge that he wanted to prove that the best restaurant in the United States didn't have to be in New York City. And he's never said that to me, but I've worked enough shifts that when New York media or New York chefs were in the dining room, it was like game on. And to be there at that time period was really awesome because you learned to push yourself. And that
I heard one of his proteges wanted to prove that the best restaurant in the United States doesn't need to be on the East Coast or the West Coast. It could be somewhere like Boulder, Colorado.
No.
Is that?
Well,
we'll get to that part of the story later. Let's keep it on French Laundry.
But yeah, it was just so fantastic working with him and his life partner, Laura Cunningham. Like you learn so much. And I think that one thing they did not get enough credit for was when they built that front of the house team, they're building a world-class restaurant. Napa 30 years ago is not Napa as it is today. 30 years ago, you did not have that talent pool of front of the house servers, maitre d's, managers. They didn't have that. And Laura and Thomas really built this great front of the house team. they were able to get great chefs because people wanted to work for Thomas. But to get that front of the house team, they had to really build that from scratch. And that's like building a legacy Super Bowl team or world championship team really from scratch.
Yeah, so I've been to the French Laundry about 4 times. And 3 to 4 have been attending kind of a private event hosted by JP Morgan. One reason I was so reluctant to give up my CEO position as a public company CEO at Zayo was because I was pretty certain I would no longer get invites to this event, and they'd close down the whole French Laundry. It was their highest end clients. They would have a conference in Napa Valley along with it. They'd have a lot of A-list kind of celebrity figures there. So when they would close down the restaurant, they also would open up the restaurant in a big way to the guests, including, what's the room with the big circular table? What's that?
That's like the private salon, private dining room. Yeah.
So they would just fill that table up with the best wines,
ever.
Yeah, ever. And they'd all be open, and you go up and you drink whatever ones you'd want, and they'd keep opening up more. And it wouldn't feel very good the next day, but man, to just be able to taste those wines in that setting was certainly, I'll say, a once in a lifetime experience, but I experienced it 3 times. However, the best experience I had there was also in that same room. And I think you actually helped on this. We were able to reserve that room, and our whole family went out there. So we filled up the family, and I didn't fill up the table with as nice a wines as JP Morgan did, but I got some nice wines out. And with my kids, Cindy's kids, our family, we were able to enjoy a great night there as well. So
how beautiful is that though? With the family and
and that room opens up into the outdoor area.
Yeah.
And when the JP Morgan event was there, we were able to, spend a lot of time in the kitchen, drinking wine, watching them prepare the food. It was just, the whole experience was a one in a kind where you go probably in the world.
Yeah. It's a very special place.
Mm.
And what's so special is 30 years in, it's better today than it was 30 years ago. That's unheard of.
Mm-hmm. Crazy. So any other memorable experiences from the French Laundry days?
Oh yeah. I think one of the greatest is being able to take care of such wonderful people like Robert Mondavi. Have Robert Mondavi come in, Julia Child, whoever,
people who are famous in the food or wine world.
And just amazing.
Do a little bit more name dropping. Who else did you take care of in your years? So there's probably laundry list of who you took care of.
So many people. But I think it was the ones that, someone
were in your industry.
Yeah, not just our industry, but they just lit up so much seeing it. But yeah, I remember once the guys from the Blue Man Group were in, and I made this horrible mistake and dropped one little drop of white wine or red wine on the guy's brand new all white Gucci suit. I was like, oh. They still give me a hard time about that, but it's okay.
Yep.
It was really a special place to work. And, I remember Thomas calling me and said, "Hey, Bobby, you got to come in. It's your day off, but I need you to come in." I go, "Okay, what's going on?" He's like, "Well, this guy wrote a book called Kitchen Confidential. His name's Anthony Bourdain.
Wow.
And he wants to film us. You got to suit up." I said, "Okay, I'll suit up." And he goes, "I'll make it worth your while." I said, "Okay, DK." So I show up, and he's like, "Okay, we were out in the garden with him. We're going to do this dinner. He's got Eric Ripert from Le Bernardin and these guys, and we're going to do 26 courses. Bobby, go in that wine cellar, choose a wine per course." I go, "Okay, 26 wines. There's only 5 of them." I was like, "Thomas, that's a lot of wine to open." He's like, "Just do it."
That's a lot of food, 26 courses.
And he goes, "And whatever's left over, you and Danette have a great night tonight." I was like, "Dude, I don't need 26 half bottles of wine to do this." But
So there's 5 of them.
Yeah, and I did wine service, wine per course. We had to come up with this whole.
And where are they sitting at the French Laundry?
They were in the room upstairs. If you go up the stairs to the bathroom to the left, that little private dining room, and it was really a magical night, and it was obviously a lot going on. But what we didn't know is at the exact same time, we had like 2 food reviewers downstairs unannounced at different tables. So now.
And they didn't know what was going on.
We didn't know until they walked in. We're like,
okay.
Whoa. So it was just like this super wildly charged night. And you're going up, you're taking care of this filming for Anthony Bourdain with 2 food critics downstairs. It was like some high stress.
Yeah. So what happened to all the wine? How much did those 5 of them go through?
Oh, they drank a fair amount of wine, but they couldn't drink at all.
No.
And we also had to go on to the next course. Yeah. So they had to go into something else. So I remember coming home that night and I'm like, okay, Danette, I would call her and I'd be like, Danette, just stay up. We're going to drink some great wine when I get home. She's like, what is going on? I go, I'll tell you when I get home. Yeah.
So how did you feel when Anthony passed away? Do you recall when you first heard about that? And
well, I remember the day. Yeah, he was with Eric Ripert,
really?
Who was with him the night that he was with us. Anthony was an incredibly brilliant human being. I think he squeezed the best out of everyone around him. And I think when someone like that, who's so brilliant, everything's going the right way for him, it makes you slow down and go, wow, we've got to be able to talk about mental health. Like it's real. And I think, especially in the restaurant industry, my generation did not talk about those things.
Yep.
And that's something we need to talk about and be able to be open about and say, hey, I'm not feeling, I'm not okay or whatever. And we still are a blue collar industry that is hard work, a lot of pressure, but we need to have our blue collar on with a touch of, hey, this is a high stress business. If you're not okay, we're here for you to say you're not okay.
Yeah. And he probably had a lot of peaks in his career, but certainly he was at one of the absolute peaks.
He was at the zenith.
Yeah. So this wasn't my career's falling apart and my life's falling apart. This was
as good as it gets.
Yeah. Wow. And what a loss, because he made a big difference in a lot of lives.
Yeah, a lot of lives. And I think it's interesting to take a step back and look at television production likes things that are hits. Mm-hmm. Like they like to duplicate comic blockbusters, Marvel, because it delivers. Well, Anthony Bourdain's show that he produced with that small, very talented film crew, it's been really hard for the industry to duplicate it. No one could do it. No one could fill his role.
And so many have tried in different ideas. I want to do something like Bourdain did, but I want to do it in this. That's probably happened 1,000 times, many of which never went anywhere, but none of them really came anywhere close to matching the potential.
It's very rare to see that in media, not just food media in general, where something at its zenith got pulled out of the equation and it has not yet been reduplicated. There's still that void there.
Yep. A void someone like you might be able to fill it.
I don't think I'm that talented.
Yes, you are. And we are going to get to some of those other talents. So what was the Boulder scene like before you opened up a restaurant here? What was the Boulder restaurant scene like? And when you tell us that story, also tell us how it is you ended up in Boulder.
So we were in the the Bay Area working for Thomas, and my mother-in-law, Danette's mom, passed away very young. She was just about to turn 60. She got cancer, and it was real quick. She got diagnosed. She got diagnosed like June and passed away right about now, late October.
And this is what year?
2000. And so we were living in the Bay Area working for Thomas, and my father-in-law, Dick Alberico, was out here. Yes, he had Danette's sister and brother close by, but Danette really and I talked like, if we're going to ever open our own restaurant, we should do it close to Dick. And I knew, look, it wasn't a big sacrifice. I knew I liked Colorado.
Yep.
And so Lachlan and I would fly out here from our days off at the laundry and stay with Dick.
Well, tell us, you mentioned a name there, Lachlan.
Yeah, my founding business partner.
So since you just mentioned his name, let's go on tangent and talk about who this guy is.
Yeah, so Lachlan and I met at the French Laundry. I remember his first day of work. He had 2 mismatching socks on, and he is really beyond a chef. He's a chef, but he is so smart on so many things. And he said, hey, I'll go with you to go open a restaurant. I mean, that was a lot of faith.
Yeah.
And we came out here and we would stay with Dick, and we looked at Denver, but Boulder seemed right. It was the nice distance also from my father-in-law that he still had to call before he came over to see me. In Boulder, we were here on a Wednesday, and we went to the farmers market at the end of looking with our realtor, and there was all these great farms, but none of those farms at that time, you didn't see them on the restaurant menus. Like now, if you go to Pizzeria Alberico, you go to Oak, you go to anywhere, it says Esoterra, Red Wagon. We're all working with the farmers.
Mm-hmm.
No one was then.
No.
It was wild because we came from the Bay Area where literally, if I opened my own restaurant, I might not get on the list to buy some of those great farm produce because the competition was so high. It was almost the opposite here. There was a guy that was a pork farmer from Fort Collins, John Long, and I remember we worked with him. And he said, he goes like, you're the first person that ever even reached out and said, yeah, I want to buy your pork. So we were like, wow, this is really an opportunity. We thought that was something. We loved the city of Boulder. But it was interesting. We opened a restaurant.
But what was Boulder scene like, the restaurant scene, before you opened something up?
It was maybe decidedly more casual. It was a vibrant scene, but it was more casual. People didn't take reservations. Like Boulder as a community was a non-reservation town. Flagstaff House did, but no one else did. And I remember and I love that I get to live in Boulder. I love my Boulder community, but like any community, it takes a while to figure things out. I don't know how many times I would try to explain to somebody how reservations work. And we're talking about Nobel Prize winning, very intelligent people.
Yeah.
But not.
And this was in 2000s?
Yeah.
No reservations.
I remember someone was like, I hear you're booked out at 7:00 for 2 months. I'm like, no, we're not booked out at 7:00. We don't take a reservation at 7 because we need 2 seatings. And they're like, why? I go, well, if we open at 5:30 and it takes 2 hours and a half to eat dinner, let's get our sundial out.
Yeah.
5:30, that means the table hopefully is ready at 7:30, but we got to flip the table. So we want to hedge our bet. We don't want to have a wait. So 7:45, if we open at 5:30, next res would be at 7:45. But what if I go a month out? I go, no, it doesn't matter how far out you go. It
I was
doesn't
probably
work.
one of those calling with those requests.
Oh, no, you weren't. It wasn't you, but there's many. But it was just like trying to explain that was different. Like if you live in San Francisco, everyone understands reservations. Not that one city's smarter than the other. We just weren't used to it.
And plus, Boulder, I think even to this day, people don't do 10 o'clock seatings.
No way.
So it's not like you can stagger it a little bit.
Yeah.
So you start with what's the latest people will tend to have dinner and then work backward from there and hear the
it's so crazy. We're 27 miles Frasca to Tavernetta. The Tavernetta guests, Denver guests, they'll take a 9:30 Thursday night reservation every day. There's no one, that's not what we do here in Boulder.
No.
Everyone's doing something else, and that's okay.
If you go sneak in a restaurant at 8:59, they kind of look at you like, sorry, we're not going to serve you dinner.
Yeah, it's just a quieter to bed town, and that's okay. But you just have to massage your reservations differently.
Yeah, I remember Juanita's back then. I remember, although it changed location somewhere in that time frame, the Italian
Laudicio's.
Let's see, 1010 was probably around back then.
1010 had just opened.
Of course.
The Med.
Yeah.
Jack's, of course.
Yeah.
Dave Query's restaurants. And we opened the same year that Kimball opened the kitchen.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we both opened in 2004.
So those, and of course, as you already mentioned, you had Flagstaff, which is where people would go if it was a higher-end dinner or special occasion. And then maybe 1010 was sort of in that category in those days. But until you opened, and I guess Kitchen opened, there really wasn't that type of scene anywhere in Boulder.
And Boulder's been amazing. People like to eat out.
Yeah.
Very lucky. Yeah. And then you got Oak, and then Brian's got Corita and all that stuff.
Yeah. Now you have multiple choices.
Including
that new Latin restaurant that opened up.
Oh, yeah. Kazobi.
They're doing a good job. Yeah.
It's great. It's delicious.
Yeah. So you decide, you're going to come to Colorado, be closer to Ned's father. You pick Boulder over Denver. Do you remember why you picked Boulder over Denver in that day?
I think Boulder felt more vibrant as a community than Denver did. I mean, I think Denver now is one of the hottest communities in the country. It's really changed. I always say that Denver changed more in 10 years than it did 50. But it just felt more vibrant, and it was it. And I think it was, I think at that time period, it was, and it's worked out great. And I love having my restaurants in Denver too.
Sure. And we'll talk about Denver in a few minutes. So now let's go to Frasca's. So you decide on this restaurant in Boulder. You came across, you somehow decided to name Frasca's. What was your vision of what you were trying to create, and how long did it take before you knew you hit it right?
So, we're 20 years in, and I still get nervous every day. So I don't think that I've hit it right yet. I'm every night nervous. But Lachlan, Danette, and I were intrigued by this region of Italy called Friuli, Venezia, Giulia, which is as far east as you go in Italy and as far north as you go. You're right next to Slovenia. It at one time was part of what is now considered modern day Slovenia. You were at one time part of the Austrian Empire, so you're northeast as far as you go, just north of Venice. And there's these restaurants there that are called Frasca's, and they are a neighborhood restaurant denoted by a branch at the end of the driveway or the front door. And we were inspired by that. And we were inspired by the people of Friuli, the wines of the region, and all of that. And we were leaving the French Laundry after it had been voted #1 restaurant in the world 2 years in a row. And we're like, okay, what do we want to work on for the rest of our career? And I said, well, can a restaurant be world-class and open to the neighborhood? Because a lot of times you go to a world-class restaurant and it's hard to either get in or it's not part of that community.
Mm-hmm.
It's like on its own universe. And so we wanted to have our goal, and we knew that, it could take our whole lifetime to achieve this, but to have the world's greatest community neighborhood restaurant that people can have now that we have a Michelin star experience. But
when did you get the Michelin star?
Last year. It was the first year that Michelin.
Congratulations, but I lost track of that.
It was the first year that Michelin came to Colorado. So it's been great. So we've had Michelin here in Colorado for 2 years. But we wanted to create this, we wanted to create a great restaurant, but that was very part of the community. And we keep working on it every day. Yeah.
Well, you've created one hell of a restaurant there. It's always such a special
thing.
It was really special. You host one of the big nights for Burgundy Wine Fest, which we just had this last weekend, which was excellent, by the way. But the last one you had that I attended, we had a little bit of a fun experience where I decided to ride my bike and park it just outside the front door of your restaurant, lock it up with not a strong enough chain. And when I went to leave the restaurant, it was gone. The bike was stolen.
The best part about that is Jeremy, the sommelier, and I had just all night been high-fiving you about being the only guy to ride his bike to Bergfest. So you get down there, you accomplish it, you get down there because look, most people are driving or Ubering and you're going to ride your bike down. Then your bike gets stolen. I think it was Sergey, our GM. Didn't he roll through the tape and find it?
On his own, didn't even ask. And next day, I think you shot me a note or someone shot me a note saying, we went through the tape, it's attached, and we have it all on film. And sure enough, the police were able to track down the bike. It took them a few weeks, but they found the bike, and we still have to this day a really nice e-bike that was found and recovered. The police never shared with me where they found it or who they found it from,
really?
But they did get
share
it back
that
to us.
with you, huh?
I didn't ask, and they didn't volunteer, so probably good on both ends. But in any case, that's just a sign, though. I mean, that's maybe a one-off sign, but it's a sign of how you guys have created a culture there where you care so much about your customers. You treat them in such a special way, not just when they're in the restaurant, but I don't know how many people have come up to me and say, "Hey, I shot Bobby a note and told him I'm going to such and such," and he said, "Got it." And next thing I know, I get the world treatment when I got there. And you've done that for so many people. And you may not hear the thanks often enough, but I could tell you, they say things to me that are so flattering to you. You should feel proud that you've created that ability.
Well, I feel so lucky. I feel lucky that I get to step on the dining room floor and do what we do.
Yep. So then you find a lease next to your Frasca's restaurant available, some additional space. What did you decide to do with that?
So we in 2009, a time period when no one else was expanding because of the economic crisis, we decided to take the space next to us. It was actually the greatest neighbor was this couple that had a gourmet dog, natural dog products, right?
Yep.
They're our neighbor. Rick, the husband, beat me outside every day for 6 years when it snowed to shovel. I'd be like, gosh darn it. He'd be shoveling my greatest neighbors. But then they ended up selling to Whole Foods and they moved. So we had this space next to us. And that's where we created Pizzeria Locale. And then we've since renamed that after my father-in-law, Dick Alberico, Pizzeria Alberico. But so we kind of reinforced our footprint on East Pearl. It also, we needed to do that remodel because Lachlan and the team at Frasca had such a small kitchen. It was so small in the old days. Like when you walk back there and you see where they're polishing glasses now, that was the old kitchen.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was like 6 linear feet. So, it's been, and so we needed to build a bigger kitchen for that team. And it's worked out really. It's been great.
Yeah, and it's been there ever since.
Yeah.
You said a brand change recently, a few years back, and it's just an easy place. I love the wines that they serve at the bar there. They're very approachable wines. It's just a nice experience, and you beefed up a little bit of the liquor selection, I think, there, and especially I noticed that recently at Frasca's too.
Yeah,
so,
100%.
Yeah, when you at the end of a meal, when you've already had probably a little more wine than you want to have, you come by with that cart and put the after dinner drinks in front of us.
Whoa, be careful.
I am not careful enough. I had a really beautiful one last Saturday. It was very nice. Okay, so you're conquering Boulder, and now you're looking up over the horizon and you see Denver.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get comfortable with trying to do something in Denver?
Well, Mark Falcone, who is the head of Continuum Development, he used to have a place in Boulder, and so he would eat with us. We've known him since we opened, and he first approached us when they were redoing.
By the way, I had one dinner in my life with Mark, and it was at Tavernetta.
Oh, was it really?
We brought out the former chancellor of DU. She was retiring, so
fantastic!
Took her out to dinner, and I invited him. He came with, and we had a fantastic dinner together there.
Oh yeah. So Mark, his kids grew up in Boulder, and he knew us, and he originally approached Lachlan and I when they were doing the bids for Union Station, when they were redoing Union Station, and he goes, "If I get the bid, would you do the food and beverage?" I said, "Yeah, let's work on that." He did not get the bid. That went to someone else, and that's okay. But what he did keep in that whole movement of real estate was that Block A. So where his office is, where Tavernetta is, and where the Limelight Hotel is, which used to be Bourne, that whole stretch he kept. And he brought Lachlan and I down. He goes, "You got to, this is what I'm going to do here." And, that's why I say it's changed so much in 10 years. That you looked at that space 12 years ago and you're like, really? And he built all that out. And then that's where Tavernetta will be. It's 7 years right now. And so it's been great being down there.
And that quickly became a staple on 5280s.
Yeah,
top 25
it's
list.
been really, really a great.
And it's a great hangout too, because you got a little more space to work with there. So your lounge bar environment is quite the scene. And
there's some people who don't even know the spaces are behind. They think it's only the lounge. And you walk through the kitchen, and then there's the.
Well, sometimes you don't want to leave that lounge there. You just want to hang out there at the bar or one of those comfortable seats. It is quite the experience. Yeah,
but it's been great, and the community, the Denver community has been so. It's just there's a lot of people who have moved to Denver, a lot of young people, a lot of diverse type of businesses. Like you had an office down there, right?
Yeah,
you had an office down there, but then you also have North Face right behind us, and and Deloitte, and there's so many different things down there.
Yep. And then you decided to do something maybe a little bit similar to what you did in Boulder. You also decided to open up another restaurant right next door to that restaurant.
Sunday Vinyl. And we opened up Sunday Vinyl right next to Tavernetta. And then we just opened in July Pizzeria Alberico. So like Pizzeria Alberico, but like the full menu, actually in a shopping center that Mark Falcone owned down right across from Cherry Hills.
Okay.
So it's technically, your zip code is technically Inglewood, but it's that last stretch of Inglewood when you go into Cherry Hills.
So tell us about Sunday Vinyl. What's the theme there? What was the inspiration?
Sunday Vinyl, Mark came to us and he had this space that had not worked out for someone who had like a grab and go grocery type spot. And he's like, "Do you think you could do something?" I go, "Yeah, I'd like to do like a wine bar there." And I'd like to have like music as a piece of it. My wife and I love listening to vinyl, and I want to have it on an all world wine list because everything else we do is so centric on Italy, and that's what we did. We opened right before COVID, and that was, of all my businesses, that's been the hardest one to navigate through COVID, because it's funny how the RTD works, that where Tavernetta is, you have a patio.
Yeah.
Where Sunday Vinyl is, I'm not allowed to have a patio.
Oh, really?
Because
there's a huge patio area there too.
And you can't do it because it's the...
Can't Mark Falcone pull a few strings?
Dude, I've been asked.
Especially with a name like Falcone. You'd think you could pull
get
that
on that.
Yeah.
But it has something to do with the emergency vehicle egress for the trains.
Yep.
But it's been great. I also think there is efficiencies having two restaurants next to each other.
Especially because when people go to your restaurants, they always want to see you, even if it's only for 3 or 4 minutes. So, you can only be at one place,
but you can be there
time. But in that case, you could be, either 2 in Boulder or 2 there. So I don't know how you are able to kind of be present as often as you are, knowing that you're moving around a lot, but it is a lot more fun when, you're there and come by and say hi, and it just brings that much more.
I also love when I see Danny over at the pizzeria at the bar. We got to give him the shout out. Your son, man.
Yeah. He is sometimes in the seats right across from us.
Oh, really?
He does a little bit of this too. I thought I would
see him.
Yeah. I'm sure he's slaving away in the office right now instead of supporting this. So let's go back to the what we talked about earlier, that Colorado is a relatively small community, yet the number of sommeliers here is a crazy number.
Wild. It's very high density of master sommeliers. And I want
how many master sommeliers would be in the world, roughly?
Like 240 or something like that.
240.
Yeah.
Is it that small a number?
Yeah. And there's some of those that aren't alive anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So the 240 have ever passed. Some of us.
Wow.
But like this year in the United States, only one person passed in North America. Guy passed. When I passed 20 plus years ago, we had 3 people pass that year. So the pass rate's not that high. But we have a guy up in Aspen, and he passed in 1996. His name is Jay Fletcher. And I was working at the Little Nell when he passed, and I was going through my advanced. So by luck of the draw, I was his first person he took under the wing. Mm-hmm. Because he was fresh from passing. He's just a guy who likes to give back. So he gave back to me. He gave back to Richard Betts, who passed. So many of us at the Little Nell, because he was in Aspen, all of a sudden there was this is how we do it. Mm-hmm. We help other people. So then when I left for a few years to go to the French Laundry, but when I came back, I wanted it to be helpful like Jay did. And so like Brett Zimmerman would show up every Saturday at Frasca during the day, and he and I would blind taste, getting him ready for his exam. I think he passed in 2007. I think he was 07 or 08, but right in there. And then he passes, and then he takes the same idea of passing it on. And it's been really great for the community.
And roughly how many are there that came through Colorado?
Lots. I mean, let me just see. Maybe 20, 10%.
10%.
10%.
Is that crazy? Holy God, you talk about unicorns. Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
It is. It's mind-boggling. Wow.
Yeah. So, some of them don't live in Colorado anymore. Their jobs have taken them elsewhere.
Sure.
Like Dustin is in New York. Sabato is in New York. But Sabato passed here. Carlton McCoy. Jonathan Polis is still here in Colorado. But yeah, it's been great.
Must be quite the club of master sommeliers when you guys know who each other is and probably have a bond that
it's
lasts
really
forever.
Good. It is. And you know what's interesting is I feel like the Colorado group, because we all went through it together, is tighter than other groups.
Yeah. So you've done other entrepreneurial things as well. So tell us about kind of what you've done in the wine itself business. Tell us what you did in the airline business.
Yeah. So, well, I'll start off with airline was interesting. I consulted for American Airlines for their business class wines. And that was really interesting because the vice president, Terry Vilipovich and Steve Johnson, they're just really into wine. Mm-hmm. And they approached me and I went through the RFP process or interview process, and they were great to work with. It was definitely so different than what I do daily. That's a lot of logistics. Okay. We need to find a great glass of Sancerre, but we need enough, because if you're going to do business class routes, it might be 3,000, 5,000 cases. That's a lot of how to find something delicious that you can get 5,000 cases and do for a menu printing is a lot. It's just different than what I do, but I love experiences like challenges like that. And then in the wine industry, when we opened Frasca, maybe the biggest hurdle we had was finding enough wines from Friuli, Venezia Giulia, to do our wine list. So let's say, simple math, you have a by the glass Friulano white wine, and you go through 3 cases a week. You need enough inventory to have 150 cases a year. Pretty simple. But there weren't importers bringing enough great Friulano wine that we didn't know what we were getting into. When you commit to that, you need some runway. Like we'd have distributors, they'd only have like 3 cases of something. That's not going to last you very long. So we went to Friuli and we said, well, let's make 150 cases. Back then they called it Tokai Friulano. So we could at least shore up that part of the by the glass.
Yep.
Boom. And that's what we thought we were doing, 150 cases. And a dear friend of mine, Richard Betts, who had Betts and Scholl with Dennis Scholl, he and Dennis kind of helped us with how do you do this? And then it started with 150 cases. And then by 2008, we started doing a little bit of Pinot Grigio. And by the end of 2009, I think we with all in, we had about 800 cases of wine we were importing and distributing. And then really, I give 1,000% credit to Lachlan, which is interesting because he's the chef mind. I'm the master sommelier mind, but he really turned back the onion skin on figuring out this how to build a wine brand in the American distribution model, which is a total mess. Mm-hmm. It's like ridiculous. There's some states like Tennessee, we have to have 2 different distributors. I mean, it's just like the liquor laws in the United States are a mess. And he really delved into that. And then as we started growing, we started realizing, whoa, this is a big deal. And so what we had to do is kind of divide as business partners. Lachlan would run Scarpetta and then use me a certain amount of days a year for Scarpetta. Like I'm going over there. I have to go over to Italy. I think it's November 12th or something. I've got like 5 days of work, and I just was in Austin, Texas, and Florida doing some sales work. But he'll put me in those things, but he runs that company. And then that was right about the same time we were opening Tavernetta. And then we were smart enough to go, we need one more partner. Like, this is a lot going on. So Peter Hoagland, who is such a wonderful business partner and has been with us for 12 years, he's kind of like the ops partner. So we brought him into the Frasca hospitality side. But Lachlan really drives Scarpetta Wine Company. And just as of this year, we folded in an importing company into Scarpetta, because what we were seeing was, after being open 20 years, we realized that there's like 30 great wineries in Friuli that now have real representation in the United States, where we've helped them get, let's say, Petrusa from Colle Orientale is now with Stelvio, with my dear friend Craig Lewis here, or Ronco de Nemetz is with Steve Lewis at Juliana, or Venica Venica. We help get these families importation. Some of these families started coming to us and they're like, Bobby, you and Lachlan are over here 4 times a year for Scarpetta. Why don't you?
And you know how to distribute across the U.S.
Know how to distribute across the U.S. And we've also gotten Scarpetta now mature enough that we've got a West Coast sales manager, Texas Southeast sales manager, East Coast, Mexico, and the Latin Americas, New York. So we've got a team. Mm-hmm. So for that team to get up to speed on a small amount of wineries that we bring over, 5, 6, with a small amount of wine, you couldn't do that on your own. You need kind of the engine of Scarpetta. But we started that. We launched it this year, but it's been about 2 years in the making.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And Carlin, who's our our wine director, she really helps us with that Benvenusa. So it's a great thing for her to get to grow with too.
Yeah, because you keep creating opportunities for people to do
fun things.
Yeah, fun things and develop themselves, develop their careers. And I want to talk more about kind of how you see the future. But before we go there, the other thing that's interesting in Boulder, maybe Denver too, is usually you think of people who've been in the restaurant industry a long time, in the wine area a long time. They're typically not the people who take the best care of themselves. Yet in Boulder, you guys do things like run marathons and take long bike rides. So tell us what that's all about. You know, how have you been able to keep up with, you know, tell us a little bit about your kind of fitness habits, and then the community around you, you know, how that is part of what you guys have brought to the table as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think, look, our industry is known for not taking care of itself.
Yes.
And and I'm going to call, every once in a while, I get in trouble. I'm going to get in trouble right now. I'm going to call out some food journalism didn't help the situation. They really promoted the bad boy chef, the party chef from the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. They shouldn't have been doing that, because then these young people, they think that's what they should be doing. In the late 90s, I was working at the Little Nell, and I was studying to take my master's sommelier exam. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to go out after work.
Which is hard.
Hard.
Yeah.
My industry.
Yeah, in your industry.
And people thought I was a total freak.
Yeah.
And my idea was, I love this industry. I want to be able to do this forever. You got to take care of yourself. So no one was doing that in the late 90s. Still not enough people are doing
Well, I can't imagine we used to get that in the business world too. You know, you go on a business trip and, you know, it was a given that you were going to go out to dinner, and whoever you were with, you know, that's a special night because the CEO's in town or whatever, and you eat too much, you drink too much. But it's every night. Every night,
yes.
People want you to hang out. They want you to stick out. Hey, let's.
And I was just like, and all of a sudden, I became more productive. I also realized I would hear my peers say that the industry was very hard on them. And I started being reflective. I'm like, no, the industry's not hard on you. You're hard on yourself. People don't like to hear that. And then, you know, someone like Brian, Craig Lewis, who's an importer, my business partner, Lachlan and Peter, we all like either, you know, Lachlan rides his bike more. I run more. I do like riding my bike too. But I think it really, you become better at your job because you have a better balance outside of your job. And in our industry, it's really important.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I wish I would have followed that path myself and figured out a way to have when I was working so hard.
Yeah, we'll see what happens next Sunday. It's my brother and I against each other at the New York City Marathon.
Oh, really? Check that out.
Two
Congratulations.
brothers in their 50s duking it out in New York City Marathon.
Emily, who's sitting across from us, just ran the Chicago Marathon.
Oh, did you?
Came just slightly short of the time to qualify for New York, right? Or for Boston.
Did you almost have a BQ?
28 seconds away.
Oh my God. What was your qualifying time? 3:25. Okay.
Oh.
You will get it.
Eventually.
Yeah. She's
I'll
relatively
give you
new.
after this, I'll give you the secret weapon.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right, good deal. So let's look forward in time. You're still in the prime of your career. There's so many, your talents go way beyond running restaurants, being a wine sommelier, master sommelier. There's so many things you can do. What is in front of you that you think you want to do? Are there other things that you're hoping to have time for?
So this is going to sound a little touchy-feely.
All right.
But
I'm up from the south side of Chicago. We're all touchy-feely down there. Jeanette could tell you that.
Yeah. But so I gave a TED talk about 10 years ago about being a hospitalian, about hospitality. When I gave the talk, I didn't know that how much our society needs that now. So if I could dream of a way that conversation, how we take care of people, how we listen to people, could leave the restaurant and hotel industry and be part of the medical profession, could be part of all these other industries that need it actually more than we do, right? Like I gave a talk to some cancer surgeons this year, and I think about, man, they need this way more than anybody, because those families coming in that are dealing with a medical situation is just a lot more important than my Friday night 2-top reservation at 8:00. But then if you look at how society has gotten, and yes, in 2 weeks, we're having an election, 2 weeks from today, but wouldn't we be a better place if people knew how to listen to each other? And hospitality is not what you do to someone, it's how you make someone feel. But the only way you can do it is learning to listen and empathize. And we're just gotten to a point where we don't see any empathy.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you used the word multiple times, give back, when you're talking about others who influenced you, the opportunity you had to influence others, role models who show kind of, here's what give back looks like, and here's what it feels like. I mean, that's why I'm so proud to have you on this podcast, is you've been kind of the role model for how to make other people feel special. And I think, the biggest part of the reason we're even doing this podcast series on Colorado Innovators is hopefully to set examples for others on how to go about doing whatever you want to do to pursue your dreams, but do it in a way where you have a give back mentality. Be inspired by the stories you hear, because you hear the theme from most of them where they most feel proud when they reflect on their journeys, their careers, on how they impacted other people's lives, how they inspired others. And I think, I agree with you. I think, I was maybe the opposite of you when I was in certain periods of my career where I didn't really understand that. I didn't have the role models or the mentors to help coach me or shape me into being able to do what I was doing well, but do it in maybe, with we'll call it less sharp elbows. But as I've gotten later in my career, I realized that's what mattered. throughout. And then how do we inspire others who are at earlier stages of their career, who have talent, who have ambition? How do we inspire them to do it in a way that really is good for the people in the community around them? And you've been, as big a role model for that in Colorado as anyone I can think of.
Well, thank you. I mean, I care about not just my little industry, but I care about our society and things like that.
And you're a global brand at this point. That may be, I don't know if that's a full exaggeration, but it's certainly true. I mean, you could go to pretty much anywhere I go to, and if your name comes up or if Boulder comes up, the first thing someone in kind of the hospitality business, first thing they say when I say I'm from Boulder is like, "Do you know Bobby Stuckey?" I mean, I don't know, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of times that's happened all over the world as far as the Middle East. And certainly if you go into the parts of Europe, Italy, and otherwise, they know who you are and they know how special you are.
Well, my industry is small.
That's not that small. There's restaurants everywhere. So anything we haven't covered that you were hoping I would get to? We covered a lot of ground.
No, I'm just humbled and honored that you carved out some time for me.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
This is easy. I'll always cover all time for you.
I love it.
Yeah. So I did make, I don't know, Brett might have mentioned to you, maybe not. I decided, unlike you, as much wine as I've enjoyed, I have trouble with the mental mapping of wines.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of wine do you want to drink? I'm like, I need, I could go to certain brands, but it's not very robust. So I said, you know what? You're not going to learn about all wines. You've already proven that yourself. In fact, you're not even going to learn about most wines. I'm going to focus on Italian wines. So starting 2 or 3 months ago, from this point forward, I shall only buy Italian wines. And Brett's been helping a bit.
Oh, that's awesome.
And trying to learn both on the white and the red. And on the white, and Cindy's been gravitating more toward white than red in recent years, and away from, say, the buttery Chardonnays and more toward something that's certainly not too fruit forward, but also not, so something that's a lighter white that is not kind of a summer white, so kind of a year-round white. So I'm going to come back to that. And on the red, especially when we're up in altitude, like a lower alcohol content is better and higher. We've liked Pinots when it's come to California. So as much as I like the heavier wines, kind of a lighter red, and I tend to like them with maybe a little bit of earthiness in it. Although I also like ones that are more fruit. But give me 2 or 3 whites and 2 or 3 reds from Italy that you'd say, okay, Dan, I don't know your full wine taste, but go this route.
Hearing what you...
And they can be your wines too. They can be your
hearing
wine
what
section.
you said about what Cindy's been gravitating to. So not as oaky like Chardonnay, but more crisp and minerally and dry. I think we should have Brett Zimmerman get you some Sauvignon Blanc from Ronco de Nemetz.
Okay.
That is a producer in Friuli. I think that would be great. It's not one of the wines I import, but they're very close family friends of ours.
Okay.
So that's one. So you want a couple whites and a couple reds?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll do that for the white. And then the Serena, the matriarch of the winery, her 3 sons are doing a really great job. And they have their own wine, Luigino Bellozio, and their Friulano Cuar is awesome. Great. And it's funny. I've seen these kids grow up. I mean, they're grown men now, but it's awesome. And then a third white from Italy that I think might be really exciting that, Mount Etna in Sicily, the Benanti family, their Petra Marina, Caracante is just fantastic. So we got Cindy taken care of.
All right.
And
I like those whites too, but she's in particular.
Yeah, I just don't want to get in trouble.
No.
And then for the reds, I think, if you're a Pinot Noir fan and you like earth, a couple things I would look at. I love beautiful Barolo and Barbaresco. I think they have they might be a little more tannic than Pinot Noir, but they are a great vehicle of terroir. So, something like GD Vira Barolo. It's just it's delicious. It's elegant. They do a great job. I think there's a renaissance. Carlin and I and our team really believe there's a renaissance going on right now in the Chianti Classico, because Chianti, when you were in college, was the fiasco. Like the
Not in college, when I was at my grandma's house, the little brown.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And or now,
what was the green bottles that they pour like a jug?
Yes.
That's kind of why.
And now Chianti Classico is just firing on all cylinders. And something from Chianti that I think is just fantastic is like either Easton Egg from the village of Rada, really great, fantastic. Lower in alcohol, really fantastic. And then another red that I like from from Italy is Barbera. Because Barbera, let's say you're doing grilled tuna and things like that, it's a lower tannic varietal. Like it's all about fruit acid. So, great, we make a Barbera, like Scarpetta Barbera would slot right in there. Something low tannin, but it has the right amount of fruit acid to go with a lot of different foods.
Okay, and then the last thing I want to cover is that those who are listening to this are going to want to go out and buy some wine from you. So where would they look for that wine? And this is a broader geographic question than Boulder or Colorado.
Okay.
What should they be looking up? Maybe give them 3 suggestions that say, try these 3 wines of mine, and I know you'll come back.
So what you would do is you would just Google wherever you are, see who imports either Scarpetta Wine Company. So you could look at our Barbera, you could look at our Pinot Grigio, you could look at our Sparkling Rosé, or you could also Google Benvenusa, VEN USA.
Say that again.
Benvenusa.
Right.
And that is our importing company. And the producers that you would see underneath that would be the great producer Alberto Pelos from Merva, Luigina Bellozio, Luca Belluzzo, and Doro Princic. Any of those underneath that.
Or you could just Google the great Bobby Stuckey, and you'll find all that, I suspect.
Yeah. Yes.
So thank you so much, Bobby.
Dan,
this
thanks
was fun.
for having me.
And thank you for creating so many great experiences for my family, my friends, and my neighbors here in Boulder and in Denver. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Bear Wars featuring Bobby Stuckey. This podcast was produced by Loud Bear Productions and edited by Courtney Caruso with support from Kendall Weinberg, Allie Berman, Emily Reed, and Gibson Seeger.